Hi, juniors. I'm Mrs. Bourne, and I'm the post-secondary counselor at Prospect High School. We have a few of the other post-secondary counselors with us today as well, and so I'm just going to introduce from Hersey High School, we have Mr. Chuckalis. From Wheeling High School, we have Miss Amador Zapata. From Elk Grove, Mr. Mayosic. We have Miss Hausworth from Rolling Meadows, who is filling in for a maternity sub for Miss Fisher. And I believe that should do it. Mr. Genovese is not able to be with us today, and he is from Buffalo Grove. So just so that you know, you all have a post-secondary counselor in your buildings, and so please use us as questions arise and you're going through this whole process. So today you're going to hear a presentation about college essays and how they fit into really the overall college application process. As the junior year winds down, I'm often getting questions on what students can do over the summer to make the college application process go more smoothly when you start applying in September. One of my key pieces of advice is always to get started on those essays over the summer. Don't mean to suggest that you spend your whole summer writing college essays, but if you work on your essays just a few hours each week, you'll really be ahead of the game and you'll have a good chance of writing some good solid essays and ones that you feel good about. The first step in getting started with your essays is to find out if your colleges even require them, because many colleges don't. From there, as you know which of your colleges require them, you can find the prompts. You can copy and paste them into maybe a Google Doc or a Word doc and just start writing. You will start to feel or start to see the similarities in the different prompts, and you might even realize that you can use portions of what you've already written in multiple essays, so it makes your job a lot easier. So we're going to get started. Our speaker today is Julie Nelson. She is the Regional Recruitment Director at Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio. And Julie has many years of experience and has read thousands of essays throughout her career. So she'll give you a little bit of the inside scoop on essay do's and don'ts, how to get started, and all of that. So take it away, Julie.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Bourne. As Mrs. Bourne said, my name is Julie Nelson, and I am the Regional Recruitment Director at Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio. But because we get about 15% of our students from the states of Illinois and Wisconsin, I get to work here in the Chicago suburbs in my home. So even if I wasn't coming to you via Zoom today, I would be just a hop, skip, and a jump away from District 214. So thanks for having me join you. And like Mrs. Bourne said, I've been doing this for 27 years. So I have read thousands of applications and thousands of essays. And so I wanted to share a little bit of my advice from somebody who actually reads these and uses these as part of your application. I'm going to switch back and forth between you looking at me and sharing my wisdom, as well as my PowerPoint. So just to kind of go back and forth and give you a little bit of a roadmap. The very end of my PowerPoint, I do have my contact information. So if there's anything that pops up in this presentation that you think, I have some questions, please feel free, shoot me an email, send me a, send me a text message. You can't do that. Shoot me an email, pick up the phone and give me a call. I'm very happy to help. So just a little bit about the essay as we go from here. Really it is part of the application. And if you want to think about the application in two parts, I would say the first part is the quantitative stuff, the stuff that can be proven and the stuff that is factual. So things like your grades and your test score if the school requires them. Even your letters of recommendation. Those are things that your teachers, have seen about you. The part of the essay that is truly, or the part of the application that is truly yours is the essay, because that's the qualitative stuff. That's you getting to talk about yourself so that we as college admission officers really get to know you better. And so in a lot of ways, if you talk to me or you talk to any of my colleagues in admissions, we will tell you, we enjoy the essays because that is our peak into not only what you can do, but who you are and how you're going to fit on our campus. So I think as you start to review whether you're looking at the application itself or you're looking at some of those prompts like Mrs. Bourne said, I think the first question or the first thing you want to start to reflect upon is, if someone never met you and you had that application as the tool to help them get to know you, how would you, put yourself out there to say, here's something you might not know about me? Because we'll get that list of activities, we'll get the list of classes that you've had, we'll get some of that factual information, but this is your chance to say, here's why I love what I love, here's why I want to study what I want to study, here's something that you'd never guess based on the information you already have. So that's a good place to start. As you start to write this essay, I think sometimes, we're pretty conditioned to just, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write this, it's going to be fantastic. I think keep in mind that as you're getting this process rolling, you may have chunks and bits and a few sentences that really shine. And so those might not come out till later in the process. You don't always have to write beginning, middle, end. You're going to play with it. But once you get going, you're going to find, or we're going to hope, that your essay includes an interesting, engaging first sentence, or the hook, right? Think about it this way. On a typical day when I'm reading applications, I generally read about 50 applications a day. I will read every word that a student sends me. I get asked that a lot, like, well, if it's bad, do you just stop reading? No, I'm going to read all the way to the end. But I really want you to kind of make that case in that first sentence for me to answer the question, so what? Right? Not to minimize anything that you're going to share with me, but I want you to be compelling enough that I want to read on. So this is not something you have to do as you sit down and you think, what is this great hook going to be? I think it's going to be easier for you as you write this essay, write the body of it and figure out how to bring me into that story, because once you get there, you want to make sure, just like any story you tell, there's an into, a through, and a beyond. So you know where you're going, you know what you have to say, and you know where you've been. If that works for you in your typical English class kind of essay, and here's my 5 paragraphs, here's the paragraph to tell you what I'm going to tell you, here's the 3 paragraphs to tell you what I'm telling you, and here's the 1 paragraph to tell you what I've told you, that's fine. It does not have to have that format. I get asked too, like, does it have to be MLA style? Oh my gosh. This is more of a reflection. It's definitely more of your chance to tell me a story as opposed to present some research. So it is a little bit more informal writing maybe, but not necessarily sloppy writing. And then finally, please make sure you're answering the question. As Mrs. Bourne alluded, you are probably going to write one really solid essay and then tweak it as you go through, because everybody's questions are similar, but not the same. And so this is a place where you want to make sure if there is a specific question being asked that you've answered it. I'm going to talk about the kinds of questions here in a minute, but before I do that, I want to remind you that these are the kinds of people that read your applications. If you're already getting nervous about who's going to read my application and who's going to review my application, know that we are here to help you in this process, and we are here to get to know you. So if your picture in your head was some like crotchety old guy who just wants to deny students, that couldn't be farther from the truth. We certainly want to help you through this process. So here are some questions that you might get asked. Some schools, their essay may be more of a personal statement. Before I worked at Xavier, I worked at Bradley University. This used to be their personal statement. And so basically what they wanted was a 1 to 2 page essay on a subject that interests you. That's kind of an open-ended question. It's very much an open-ended question. So, they went on to say, here are some ideas. Here are some ways to get to the heart of that matter. So maybe it's an experience or a person who's influenced you, or your perspective on an issue, anything you want the admissions committee to know. So this is your chance to say, hey, this is what I'm interested in. This is who I am. So that's a personal statement. Sometimes schools go one step further than that, and they ask for something called an academic personal statement. Illinois State is one of those schools. You do not have to write an essay or a personal statement for Illinois State, but they certainly recommend it for students who don't really fall in their published middle 50% range. So when Illinois State asks for this academic personal statement, they're really looking for you to say, here's why I think I can be successful at your institution. And they ask you for 3 very specific things. Why is Illinois State a good fit for your educational goals? What are your strengths and weaknesses? And then any circumstances that affected your high school academic performance. You know, one of the things that I think people are concerned about, or certainly have top of mind, is the fact that your second semester of junior year was interrupted by a global pandemic. Certainly everybody's going through that situation. So I don't know, unless you've got a very specific situation, how COVID-19 affected your life. I don't know that that's kind of a good blanket, because it's affected everybody's life. So I would say, unless it's touched you very personally, I don't know that I would write about it. So that's an academic personal statement. And then a lot of you are going to use the Common application as the way that you apply to schools. And so I put up the Common App prompts. These are the same ones that you guys will get to choose from this year. There are 7 of them. You do not have to write all 7. People ask me all the time, like, oh my gosh, that'd be a lot of writing. You pick one of these. And keep in mind that when you write this one application for Common App, it goes to every school with which you use the Common application to apply. So one really good piece of advice when you're writing that Common application essay is, do not include the name or characteristics of a particular school. Because if you spend your time writing about Marquette University and then you send your application to Xavier University as well as Marquette, I'm going to feel bad when I read that, because you've spent the last 500 to 650 words talking about Milwaukee and Marquette and why you want to be a Golden Eagle. So keep that in mind. One thing that I want you to notice as you look at these Common application prompts is that they're very different. Some of these questions are going to resonate with you. Some of these questions will not. But the one thing all of these questions have in common is that they include the word you. This essay is about you, not what you've learned, perhaps maybe what you've learned, but mostly about your reflections on these topics. That's the big part of it. And I think sometimes, and if you look at all the questions, they kind of have a first part and a second part. So if you looked at, let's say, question number 2, for an example, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? This question gets answered an awful lot. This question oftentimes revolves around, not making a team, not getting a part in a play, getting an athletic injury at the start of a really crucial season for you. Whatever that setback or that bump in the road was for you. What happens a lot of times is that as students write this essay, they spend so much time talking about that challenge, that setback, that failure, that they completely negate or forget that second part of the question. How did it affect you, and what did you learn? That's truly the most important piece of this, is that you have that time to reflect, to share that information with me. So I would say a good rule of thumb is, if you're going to write an essay like that, I would take about 30% of the time to talk about that challenge, that setback, that failure, set the stage with that information, but the other 70% should really be about your reflection on the experience. How did it affect you? What did you learn? I will tell you, the last couple of years, I am pretty sure that before any of the current pandemic happened, there was actually another one going on, and that was of torn ACLs. Oh my gosh, there is a overabundance of torn ACLs in this country, or at least in the students that apply to Xavier, because I read a lot of those kinds of applications. And it becomes this same recitation of, here's the day my injury happened, and it goes into really graphic detail about the sickening wet pop and the writhing in pain and rolling on the field, and it gets real graphic. And I don't learn very much about you except that it was a gross thing to have your ACL tear. My favorite ACL, and I never thought I would say that, my favorite ACL tearing essay was actually not so much about the injury. That was like 2 sentences. I felt the pop, I knew my season was over. The best part of it, the young lady that wrote this essay played high school basketball, was a star on her team, really was kind of the driving force on the court, was a captain. But what she learned about herself after having been benched then because of her injury was that it wasn't so much her ability to play that was a key part of the team, but was her ability to help her teammates. So when she was playing, she was very quiet on the court because she didn't want to be seen as a boss. She didn't want to be seen as bossy, really. Like, I'm this, I'm such a good player and now I'm going to tell you what to do. But when she got sat on the bench, when she was sidelined, she could see the plays that her teammates were missing. She could see when people were feeling a little more low energy. So she became that cheerleader, she became that sideline coach, and her teammates responded in kind, and they said, we are so glad that you took the time to yell those things to us because it really helped us play better. That's what we're looking for in that application, not the whole recitation or the essay, not the whole recitation of what happened, but what happened because of that setback or failure. I highlighted that question. I would say, if whatever ones of these questions really appeal to you, resonate with you, absolutely write about them. There's not a perfect topic, nor is there a perfect question. Sometimes I get asked, well, if I pick a topic that not everybody does, is that going to help my application stand out more? I don't think so. I think it really comes down to you being brave, maybe being a little vulnerable, and writing from your heart. And whatever topic you choose, your interest in, your passion for, your ability to really talk about how that plays a part in your life is what makes your application stand out. Now, that said, if you've done something really unusual, really crazy, absolutely write about it. But if you're just, hey, I'm a kid from the northwest suburbs of Chicago, I live a pretty normal life, don't feel like just because you haven't, climbed Mount Everest, that your application's not going to stand out. I have read some really amazing essays about kind of mundane topics. One of my favorite ones ever, if you look at number 5, it says, discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. It used to say, discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that marked your transition from childhood to adulthood. Whoa, like that is an unbelievably large question, right? So you're not going to say, oh, of course, I have this thing. But a young man a couple years ago wrote the answer to that essay when it still said childhood to adulthood. And he talked about how in middle school, he asked a girl to the movies, and he got enough nerve during that date to put his arm around her. And that's what marks his transition from childhood to adulthood. It's a pretty normal thing, right? I loved that essay for so many reasons, but mostly because I got to know him as a person. One of my favorite parts of that essay, he talks about getting ready, and he was nervous to go on this date, so he put on his favorite cargo shorts and his best graphic tee, and he sprayed the Axe body spray in the air, and he did like the little shimmy through, and I'm like, now you're a real kid. He was incredibly brilliant. He had a great list of activities. All of that was just kind of, yes, of course, but the essay and his vulnerability and his ability to really put his personality into the essay is what made it so very good. So know that there's not a right answer or a wrong answer when it comes to that. So that's the common application. There are also other kinds of questions. There's the coalition application. They will ask their questions. If you're applying to U of I, for example, they're going to ask you questions specifically about majors. So again, read the question and be ready to answer it. I would say there are some schools out there who really pride themselves on having unusual questions. Here in Illinois, of course, we've got one kind of in our backyard. The University of Chicago is always renowned for their questions and how they answer, or how they ask those. So a couple of years ago, this was their question. Find X. That was it. If you know anything about the University of Chicago, that's a very typical University of Chicago question. They want their students to be cerebral, they want their students to be quirky, and they want their students to think outside the box. So that is all encapsulated in those 2 words in the period, find X. Here's another one of my favorite wildcards. Sarch said, hell is other people, but Streisand saying people who need people are the luckiest people in the world. With whom do you agree and why? Don't be icky. Tells you a lot about Amherst. Certainly they don't want you to be icky, but they also, expect that you know who those 2 people are. They expect you to have an opinion. Do you like people or do you not like people? It's okay either way. And then my last of my favorite wildcards is this one. You have just completed your 300-page autobiography. Please submit page 217. I've done this presentation several times before. And so one of the times I did this, I had a young lady raise her hand and she was like, I'm 15 years old. Page 217 is like when I'm 13. And I was like, whoa, I never thought of it that way. Because when I read it, I thought, you want me to project into the future, kind of get a sense of what am I doing just past middle age? Either way is fine, but it's your chance to kind of define, here's a point in my life, not so long ago, or here's a point in my life down the road somewhere, and how that's going to fit. The last question you might get asked is this: why our school? So if you're applying to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, they may ask you, why Wisconsin? Why Marquette? Why Northwestern? This is where you really need to do your homework and to be able to say, of all the things I'm interested in about your school, how I've made that match between your school and me, this is the thing that's most interesting to me. And so it could be a major. It could be a club. It could be the fact that or you've met or you've read about somebody who's doing some really interesting research on that campus, or that you've seen, here's what I think I'm going to find, what the academic experience is going to be like on that campus. So this is where you don't want to spit back all the pretty words we give you in our admission brochures. You don't want to spit back, all the statistics that you can find online, or who founded that school, hundreds of years ago. This is you telling the admission committee, this is why I'm a good fit. This is why I can't wait to be part of your academic experience at that institution. So keep that in mind too, that it's got to be your words. It's got to be your voice. I'm the mom of a high schooler as well. And I know when he was writing his college essay last year, certainly the English teacher wannabe in me, he would bring his essay to me and say, Mom, what do you think? It was hard for me to sit back and be like, I would change this word, because if I started changing words, it wouldn't sound like him. And so that's, I think, the balance that you have to drive. Certainly you want somebody to proofread. Certainly you want somebody to take a look at it and give you some feedback. But I also think to keep in mind, because we ask the questions with the word you in them, it needs to be your words. It needs to be your thoughts. It needs to be your syntax. If you are someone who speaks very eloquently and uses lots of big flowery language, use that language in your essay, because it's going to show as we go through the rest of your application. If you're somebody who, writing isn't really your strong suit, but you can do it okay, don't feel like you have to jump into that thesaurus feature and pick the biggest word you can find when that's not how you talk. You want to be able to make it sound like you. So there's kind of what you're going to be asked to do. The hardest part, I think, is actually sitting down and starting. So I want to give you a little bit of advice as you go into the starting process for this. And so here's what I would say. When you get to that point and when you start to sit down to get ready to write, you don't want to try and do this in the middle of your living room, trying to do it on your phone. Actually make yourself some quiet space and get going to there, because you need to dig a little bit deeper than your typical, I'm going to write an English paper. There's a great website out there called the College Essay Guy. And I really love the kinds of brainstorming exercises that he's got for students. And these are some of my favorite questions. You're probably not going to get asked any of these questions on a college essay. So you're probably sitting there like, Julie, why do you want me to answer these questions? Because if you give yourself a little bit of time to think about what you're terrible at, but you love to do anyway, quite frankly, you could spin that into that question number 2 on the Common App. What's an obstacle? I'm a terrible dancer, but I wanted to try out for my school's dance team, right? I could never throw a ball to save my life, but I love watching baseball because. Those are the kinds of things that if you just take a second and really reflect on some of these questions, you can do it. So College Essay Guy, he's your go-to when you're starting to brainstorm a little bit. I will also tell you that if you read the questions themselves, we're going to give you some keys and some hints about what we're really asking for. So if the question includes something like list or define or explain or compare and contrast, we're giving you some clues about how you should write that essay. We also give you some clues in the word limitations. So if you're writing those common application essays, they generally say no less than 250, no more than 650 words. It will tell you if you've got more than 650 words on the common application, when you cut and paste that essay into the box online, it will tell you you are 72 words too many. So you can't just hit submit and then send me those other 72 words. You've got to be concise enough to fit in that box. If you're applying to the University of Illinois, their application essays, the ones about your major, are about 300 words. That's about a solid paragraph and a half. We're asking you to write within those parameters for a couple of reasons. One, for folks like me who read applications all day, you can't expect that we're all going to read novels from students. We want you to kind of, pare it down. But 2, that is an exercise in and of itself. No matter where you're going to go to college, you are going to need to write. And so we want to see that you've got the writing skills that will carry you into and through and beyond, if you will, college themselves. So that's really part of it. I mentioned before, if you write really well in that 5-paragraph essay, fantastic. If you want to take a different format because you feel it fits your story better, go ahead. I had a young lady a couple of years ago who wrote her essay about teaching herself how to play the piano. And so her essay, at the very beginning, the sentences were short and used shorter words and was a little bit more choppy. So if you read it out loud, it sounded kind of like somebody plunking away and trying to find those right notes. And as the essay progressed and as her ability to play the piano progressed, her sentences got a little longer, a little more flowery, a little more beautiful, to be honest. And so you could almost hear that the fits and starts of learning how to play the piano to becoming a little more proficient. It was a beautiful essay, but absolutely used the format to her advantage. Was it perfect the first time she wrote it? Probably not, because you are going to need at, you know, a rough draft. You're going to need something to just put some words on paper and to figure out, where do I want this to go? So here's a little writing exercise for you, just to start getting some words on paper. I would say, open up a fresh Google Doc, set your, you know, take your phone out, turn off all the notifications and all the alarms and everything else, and pull open the timer. Set your timer for 10 minutes and just start typing. You could be typing your name, you could be typing, I don't know why I need to write this essay, but as you kind of get that piece of it out of your head, you're going to start to think, okay, what could I write this essay about? And you're going to write down some stuff. At the end of the 10 minutes, take a look at that stuff. What's on the screen? You might have 2 or 3 sentences where you're like, I could probably write about this. You might have a phrase. You might have one word, but you have something. So set your timer again for 10 minutes. Take that word or phrase or those sentences and type about that for 10 minutes. At the end of that 10 minutes, take a look. You might have 2 or 3 new ideas in there. Quite frankly, you started typing and then you're like, this isn't really where I want to go. I'm going to type something else over here. Set your timer one more time for 10 minutes. Take whatever that thing is that now speaks to you and type about that for 10 minutes. At the end of a half an hour, you've got a super rough draft, but you've got something. And it's not just walking into your post-secondary counselor's office and saying, I know I have to write this essay, but I don't even know where to start. Instead, you can say, here, I started, I took a half an hour, I have 3 sentences that I really like and about 18 sentences that I don't like. What's in here that we can use to start to formulate that essay? It's perfect. Doesn't have to be perfect the first time out. You may get, you know, halfway into it and realize, no, this isn't what I want to write about at all, but at least you started. And I think that's the biggest hurdle that anybody has to jump over. So just get going. I will tell you, there's a couple of things I don't want you to write about. And these are they. Please don't tell me that something changed your life. If you just come out and say, this thing changed my life, you're telling me, you're not showing me, right? You're not painting that picture. You want to, if something has truly changed your life, and I don't care if it's something big or something little, you want to show me the before and the after. You want to show me, how did I get from point A to point B? You don't ever have to use the phrase changed my life, but you can very clearly delineate the before and the after. So I would stay away from changed my life. I would also stay away from making a travel experience a travelogue. I'm actually working with another young lady right now who's starting her essay, and she has an unbelievable experience in that she and her mom go to France and Spain every summer for 6 weeks. Must be nice, right? So I said, here's the thing. You don't want to tell me about just going there. You don't want to tell me about your time in the airport. You don't want to tell me about the getting there, unless that's part of, there's a routine to it. What you really want to tell me about is, what do you look forward to once you're there? Who is it that you're going to visit? What is the tradition that you look forward to? Those are the kinds of things that are going to help me get to know you. We all have, foibles in our travels. We all have things that we don't like about just the process. But what is it that's really propelling you to tell me this story and make it part of who you are? The next one, and I'm not being, mean to engineers, but I would say this happens in 2 ways. People who want to be engineers want to always talk to me about their Legos. People who want to be nurses always want to talk to me about how they want to help people. Truly, that ability to tinker and put things together, yes, you need that to be an engineer. The kind heart, the empathy, all of those kinds of things, you need that to be a nurse. But that's not the whole picture of that experience. So while a story about you taking your Legos out of the box and ripping up the instructions and building something cooler than the instructions could have helped you build, that's a great into, but it's not the whole story. Because if you're hopefully going to, be the next civil engineer and create something that's going to make our world greener, I don't know that, pushing some Legos into that green piece that we all get at the bottom is really going to help you. And then the last thing that I would try and avoid is, certainly some of these essays are going to ask you to reflect on a person that's been influential in your life. And if that's what you're going to write about, please, 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 number one, if that person is no longer with us, don't make the essay about the day that person passed away. That's a rough day for anybody, much less you don't know where that person who's reading it is at. So that's a hard day to have to relive. What I would much rather hear is, what has that person meant to you? What kind of legacy do you want to live on through the lessons of that person? I think the other thing is, when you're writing an essay like that, again, this is where that 70-30 rule really comes into play. You want to take about 30% of that essay to talk about that person and their influence on you, and 70% about you and about how, because you knew this person, the rest of your life is going to be changed in some way. So stay away from those. So just a few quick do's and don'ts as I wrap this up. Certainly having read a lot of applications in my day, I've seen some really good examples of things. I've seen some really bad examples of things. So one of the things I would really encourage you to think about as you go through this process, spell check is not a substitute for proofreading. We all have computers in front of us. They all kind of tell us when we do something wrong, but they will not tell you if you've written something, a correct word, and used it incorrectly, or if you've substituted one word for another. I've seen some pretty hilarious examples of this. I've seen some pretty terrible examples of this. So make sure you spell check for sure, but you also have somebody take a look at that essay before you submit it. The other thing that I think I get asked a lot when it comes down to this is, what do you want me to write about? Everybody wants to know what the right answer is for an essay. There is no right answer. If there was just one right answer, somebody would have written that book already, made $1 million, and gone on with the rest of their life. Your story is yours. And that's the thing that I always try and impart to students. I can't tell you what to write about because I don't know you yet. You're going to find that story that helps illuminate who you are, what your hopes and dreams are, who you want to be, why that school's right for you, and that's your answer. And so that's really the piece of this that I hope you take away more than any other. The other piece is, I talked about the hook. So sometimes students really want to surprise me in some way. Little irony, little twist, perfect. Shocking, maybe not. So don't throw the profanity in there. Don't tell me about something that you've done that's illegal or immoral. This isn't true confession time. Those kinds of shocks in an essay probably aren't going to help you. Surprises, twists, absolutely. We want to see those. So make sure, again, you want this to be compelling. You want it to be interesting. I've said this before, I'll say it again. We want you to be brave. We want you to write with your heart, because that's how we get to know who you are. And I think the other thing that happens too is students sometimes feel like, I don't have such a big story that I'm going to jump off the page. You're the best you there is. And that's what I love about my job. It's because every time I open an application, every time I get to that essay part, if you're a reader, you'll understand this. It's kind of like when you crack the spine on a brand new book and you think, who am I going to meet inside these pages? And that's really what the essay does for us. It helps us meet you. I would say one last piece of advice, and if you're going to write about something that you're struggling with or that you have struggled with, sometimes you need to reflect a little bit and you need to talk to the folks who can best counsel you, whether that's your parents or a teacher or your counselors, to really say, am I ready to write about this? And so what I like to encourage students to do is to write those kinds of stories, whether it's a struggle with, your mental illness or some sort of loss, you want to write it from a place that's a scar, not a scab. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say you fall off your bike and you hurt your knee, and you've got this icky scab on your knee, and every time you put on your jeans, it hurts. And every time you bend your knee, it hurts. And so it's there and it's just kind of nagging at you still. But a couple weeks later, that scab's gone away. You could talk about it and be like, oh man, I fell off my bike and it hurt so much, but I'm here now. And so that's where, if you are going to write about something that is, a struggle, that is a pain, that you're writing from a place where you've been through it, and you can address it in a way that's not going to feel so raw to you. So that's the other piece of advice I have for you. But regardless, summer is a great time to start thinking about this, to start writing this, to start looking for some of that feedback so that you can move forward, so that by the time August comes around and you start to apply for colleges, no rush, but that's really when most of these applications open, you'll have an opportunity to say, okay, I've got a head start. I know where I'm heading with this essay, and I'm ready to apply and start my senior year. So those are my pieces of advice as it comes to the application. Certainly, if you have questions, I mentioned before that I'm more than happy to field those from you. So, please feel free. If you have questions, here's all my contact information. Give me a holler, shoot me an email, and I'm good to go. But again, I want to thank the counselors at 214 for having me and for allowing me to go from here. So, Mrs. Bourne.
Thank you, Julie. That was awesome. I think the advice is definitely things that we can tell our students, but for some reason, when you hear it from an admissions counselor who is reading the essays day in and day out, it just has so much more impact. I'm sure it has motivated so many of our students to get started. I think sometimes just thinking about it stresses you out, but getting started is really, that first step in getting going with it. I often hear from students when we first get back in the fall saying either, Mrs. Bourne, I'm so happy that you told us to start our essays over the summer. I wrote some of them and I'm feeling really good about them. Or it might be about, October, where I'll be hearing from a senior saying, I wish I would have, heeded the advice and done a little bit of the writing over the summer. You definitely have a lot more time. You definitely can put some more thought into it. And hopefully it allows you then to put forth your best piece of writing. So I think you covered so much. I don't know, have you seen any chats from the other post-secondary counselors? Any questions?
I sure have not. So if there are questions, of course, I'm always happy to field those, but otherwise, happy writing.
Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to your post-secondary counselor in your building or to Julie. So we're going to end here, and we wish all of you juniors very much success with starting your essays, and have a wonderful summer. Thank you.